Hi everyone, welcome to Smart City Institute Japan's webinar series called Global Perspectives on Smart Cities. I'm your host, Tak Nagumo, Executive Director of the Smart City Institute Japan. Today we have a session on UK smart cities, and it's titled Smart Cities as the Engine of the Growth and the Prosperity. And we'd like to invite a distinguished speaker from Catapult, Connected Places, Mr. Andrew Cockburn. So Andrew, please come in. Hi.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the very kind invitation to speak today.
I'm delighted to have you with us. And many Japanese people are interested in the smart city cases in UK. So this is a rare opportunity to hear from UK directly via this internet. And I'm also particularly interested in Catapult activity, which is kind of, precursor to our activity. We are a new organization established about a year and a half ago. So we would like to learn from you as well. And before I hand it over to Andrew, just a little housekeeping matter for viewers. We would like to encourage to have comments, questions, your message to Andrew via the chat boxes. And then when you write a message, please choose all panelists and participants from the pull-down menu. すべてのパネリストおよび出席者を選んで書き込みをお願いします。All right, so we are ready to go. So Andrew, your show time.
Thank you very much, Tak. I will share my screen. If you could please tell me when you can see it, then I'd be delighted to present.
Okay, now it's on.
Excellent, thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this presentation today. My name is Andrew Cockburn, and I work at the UK's Connected Places Catapult, which is the UK's Centre of Expertise for Smart Cities. So today I'm going to say a few words about cities, about smart cities, a little bit of an explanation about why an organisation such as the Connected Places Catapult exists. And I'll talk about a few examples in the UK of what we do when we do smart cities. So I've used the word cities quite a lot. So in the UK, from the UK perspective, and very much globally, cities are seen as essential drivers of economic growth, of prosperity, of the creation of jobs, of the creation of innovation. And it's really, it's super important. I mean, very basics are, a lot of cities grow faster than the actual countries in terms of economic growth. A lot of wealth creation is from the cities, innovation creation, and most people in the world live in cities. So it's really important to focus on cities because that's where technology, people, ideas happen. And when we look at the big challenges of today, the net zero, the low emissions, when we look at the application of technologies, most of this really starts and has the big impact in the city space. So it's really important to give these places the attention they deserve. So smart cities, I've had the pleasure of working all around the world in the smart city space for many years. And smart cities can mean many things to many different people. So before I start, I'll just say a few words about what a smart city is. And in this presentation, I put smart in brackets because a smart city is a city. And a city has many, many different parts, many functions, many service deliveries. And so there's two ways really of looking at smart cities. One is a holistic, let's do the whole city space. And one, and this is really the UK perspective, we look at it as building blocks, as different pieces. And these different pieces all affect the other pieces. They all have relationships. So if we're going to look at the smart city and we're going to make a positive impact through the application of innovation, structures, services, then we want to understand the connection between the other blocks of the city space. So we may focus on mobility, we may focus on new efficient electric vehicles, but we have to understand how that affects the economy, the society, the quality of life. And so we tend to take the smart cities approach by looking at these blocks. So the UK does not have a national smart cities strategy. The UK very much focuses on city-based projects, and we tend to look at smart cities from bottom up in terms of they tend to be what we call baselined and benchmarked. You build an evidence base to say, okay, this is what it is, this is what it looks like. Then we do a lot of testing, trialing, and validations, which is to allow us to see if the smart city projects work and have the outcomes and outputs that we want. And then we look to scale them and move them to other cities. So smart cities, it's very much, there's many ways of measuring it. You can measure all of these different blocks in many different ways. There is no, or we don't believe there is a right way of doing smart cities, but we believe that if you measure it, you can change it. So as long as you can measure the different aspects of a city, and there's many ways of doing that I'll come on to in a second, then you can see just how smart you are. And as you look to make your city smarter, you look to improve the areas that you measure. So our smart cities approach is very much evidence-based. It's data-driven. So we look to be able to measure those bits of the city. And then as we look at the smart city projects, we look to measure them to demonstrate whether or not they are effective. And if we can measure them that they are effective, we look to move them into other cities. So when we look at the smart cities space, there's really 4 key stakeholders that we look at: government, citizen, business, and academia. Now, each one, there's lots of crossover, but each one has, we think, roles to play in the city space, be it the government of the setting the policy and standards, academia producing the very smart people and innovations, business creating the jobs and paying the tax and solving challenges in the city, and citizens using the services and enjoying the life in the city. So we always think, while you understand the different building blocks of the city and your smart city projects tend to affect them, you also have to understand the 4 main groups that all are connected in the city space. So when I talk about smart cities, I talk about the different bits of the city services and functions. I talk about how they can be measured and changed through the application of smart innovations, processes, technologies. And I talk about the 4 different stakeholder groups who are part of the users of the city space. So that's the smart cities idea that I talk about. And now the Connected Places Catapult. So the Connected Places Catapult, it was set up to really support the smart cities agenda in the UK. It is a non-for-profit organization. So it's not government, it's a research technology organization, which is a mix of business and it's a mix of academia. And we're basically sitting in between government, industry, and academia, and we help people collaborate and cooperate and succeed. We're there to make everybody successful, because in the smart city space, I mentioned, there's all these different blocks that affect each other, and there's these 4 stakeholder groups who all have to collaborate to make smart cities successful. And so our job is to help them all be successful. So the catapults were set up by the British government maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. They were there to support the development of the UK economy. So I've talked about the cities as the engines of growth. Cities are where things happen, but the government, its role of helping the economy develop is to have the right national policies in place. So the UK has a policy called the Industrial Strategy, and that's how it makes sure the economy develops in the right direction. Now, having the government policy is very important, but how do you make policy happen? You make policy happen by having organizations that support different parts of the economy. And these are catapults. And because they're not government, they can work with industry and academia easier. There are 9 catapults in the UK, all set up to focus on supporting different parts of the economy. So Energy Systems Catapult looks at the energy systems of today and tomorrow. Compound Semiconductor Catapult, it looks at the application and the development of new compound semiconductors. The Offshore Wind and Renewables Catapult, etc. We are the Smart Cities and Mobility Catapult. We focus on the smart cities and mobility part of the economy. We've got about 250 staff, 4 offices in the UK, and we're very active working overseas with partners. So as I said, we're part academic and we're part business. So we publish a lot of methodologies, a lot of thought leadership. We do a lot of advisory work for governments. We do a lot of work for business, and we do a lot of work in the academic and thought leadership space. All of these reports and many more are on our website. We look at emerging technologies. We look at how to make cities more successful, how to help cities collaborate and cooperate, and many other things. And I can talk about these more as we go through the presentation. But as I said, everything that I talk about is available on our website. So innovation is really key in the city space. And I mentioned innovation at the start. Now, innovation is often thought of as one person's clever idea, but the UK approach in the smart cities and city space is very structured, because we believe it's very good to have skills and clever people. It's very good to invest a lot in the universities and in early stage companies. But how do we make sure that all these clever people coming from university, all these clever ideas in business, all these clever ideas in academia, how do we make sure that they come into the economy and they contribute to the development of the economy? So in the UK, we're very big on putting structures and processes in place, mostly in cities, to support the skills agenda, jobs creation, business creation, and cities engage with this so that we get outputs of innovation. We want innovation to create jobs. We want innovation to create companies, and we want cities to be able to engage with innovation. So the Connected Places Catapult has lots of programs in place to support these things. So we're very busy at doing these things in the UK, and we run a lot of these programs around the world with partners as well. And just finishing up on the catapult. So you hear a lot in smart cities about technology. You'll hear about 5G, IoT, blockchain, artificial intelligence, AI, and that's fine. But at the catapult, we're not so much about the technology. We look at the application of the technology. So 5G is a good example. Many people look at how clever the technology of 5G is, and that's great. What we look at is, what does it mean for cities? What are the business models? What are the new things that the city can do? How do you help a city understand the technology, upskill, capacity build? How can the city support new businesses, new models from academia in the 5G space? And we also ask the question, does 5G work? Is there a business model? Is there a return on investment for the city, etc.? So for all of these things, we look at user acceptance, how it works in the city space, and all these other things. So we're very interested in these emerging technologies, but it's very much on what these technologies can do, and we help people understand what they can do and how they can work together with these technologies. So at the highest level, we advise government. So we are an innovation laboratory for the UK's Department for Transport. So what's really important in the city space and smart city space, you've got two things. You've got technology, which develops really quickly, but you've got standards, policies, and regulation. And usually in government, policy, regulation, and standards, it happens much slower than technology. But you need the standards, policy, and regulations so that you can get the emerging technologies working in society and delivering good benefits. So we help the UK government develop, test, and trial new policies, standards, and regulations around things like beyond line of sight drones, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. And we help cities understand these regulations and these standards and these policies so that businesses and the cities and academia and the government can work together better. So it's really important to help the government engage with these innovations and technologies as much as it is to help the cities and to help the businesses. So we again sit in the middle of these things. So we help cities understand themselves also. So cities are very complex places. And I talked at the start about measuring. If you can measure something, then you can look to put structures and plans and projects in place to change them. So in a smart city context, if we want to make mobility in a city smarter, we need to understand what the mobility is in that city. We need to measure it, and we need to put plans in place to help a city change it. Many times around the world, we see people just looking at applying technology to make their mobility smarter, and then they measure it afterwards. So we developed a tool called the City Topology Index, which allows us to put a framework around a city and score these building blocks of a city. And this allows us to compare cities as well. So we can go to Osaka or Fukushima, and we can tell them what the mobility score is like in many key areas. And we can say, well, this is what it compares to Tokyo. This is what it compares to London. This is what it compares to New York. And then we can help them understand, okay, if you want to change these areas of mobility and become smarter and progress, then you can put these programs and projects in place. So as a catapult, we can help cities understand how they score. We can help them measure the different areas of the city, and then we can help them understand what they can do to become smarter. So it's very much data-driven, and we use tools like this to help build an evidence base that then allows a city to make intelligent and smart decisions about how to improve bits of its city and become smarter. So we do a lot in that area. And so I've got this really interesting dashboard that I open up, and it gives me lots and lots of data where I can compare cities, I can contrast them, I can model different interventions, different projects. I can, I could tell Kyoto, oh, if you do these things, then you can change your score in this way. We can look at other cities that have done various smart city projects, and we can say this is the effect that they had, and we can score these. So we allow cities to measure their smartness, and we allow them to measure the change of their smart city projects, which is very interesting. So a lot of the things we do, it's very much data-driven, and it's about helping cities become smarter. So I'll just say a few words about how we've done this around the world, because there's many levels of smart city projects. So we help cities and countries understand the value of working in the smart city space. We help some of the key thematics in the world happen. So connected autonomous vehicles is the example I'll give, which has got some great Japanese companies involved. And I'll talk a little bit about how we help companies become smarter as well. So a project I've just finished in Indonesia was very much helping them engage with the net zero space. So net zero, climate emergency, UN Sustainable Development Goals are really important around the world. But you need, as I said, we sit between government, business, and academia. And really, you need them all to collaborate and work together to solve things like net zero, to become carbon neutral. But all of them have different things that they want to achieve in their day jobs. So business wants to make profit, business wants to make new business, academia wants to study interesting things, government wants the country and the cities to function well. They want people to pay tax. Net zero is not a priority for all of them. So we build projects like the one we did in Indonesia to help link all of their interests, to make them understand that to work towards net zero, they can all achieve what they want to do. So we looked at how Indonesia can support the development of new electric vehicle businesses and business models. We looked at how cities can improve their mobility scores and how can become more efficient, drive new revenue streams. And we helped academia look at how they can help bring some of their research and development into the economy. So we built out a project helping them understand how they can all win together by cooperating while looking and focusing on the net zero agenda. So we do a lot of that sort of work around the world. The next level of work we do, I'll talk about connected autonomous vehicles. And this is a great example. It involves Nissan and Hitachi. If you look at the slides along the bottom, you'll see two big Japanese companies, Nissan and Hitachi. You'll see University of Cranfield. You'll see the University of Leeds. You'll see Highways England, the government. You'll see government, business, and academia. Really important, because connected autonomous vehicles, it's a theme, it's a thing, it's a technology, but how do you make it happen? So the government needs to understand the regulations, the rules. They need to understand the safety implications. The universities need to bring their clever research and development to reality. And, you know, Nissan and Hitachi, they want to further development their technology in this area, and they want people to use their connected autonomous vehicle technology. So we build a project where we help them all work together, and we drove a Nissan car over 200 miles through cities, through countryside, through different traffic conditions, through different weather conditions. And we basically helped them all succeed and become a little better at what they did through this project and collaborating and working together. So it was a really interesting project, and I thought it was quite good because it involves some great Japanese companies. So this is an example where we look at a thematic in smart cities, which is connected autonomous vehicles, and how to make them happen. And by themselves, Nissan and Hitachi can't make connected autonomous vehicles happen. By themselves, the UK government can't make connected autonomous vehicles happen. And by themselves, the universities can't make connected autonomous vehicles happen. But if they work together, they can. And that's one of the roles of the Catapult, to make these things possible. And then the last example I'll give you is how we work with companies to support smart city technologies happen. So here's an example of a managed service company. So this is a large organization called Amy, and they own and manage facilities. So they own and manage train stations, buildings, developments, government facilities. They're very good at doing this. But because they own so many buildings and so many places and manage them, they obviously will produce lots of CO2. They will produce lots of traffic congestion. They will use lots of energy. So how does a large organization like this engage with new, emerging, clever startup companies? But equally, how do new, clever, emerging startup companies engage with large, massive, huge companies like Amy? So we have programs that we put in place where we work with the large company to understand what they do, what they want to do, but we also help them understand what they could do, what is possible. So we look at how we can help them save energy. We look at how we can help them bring more electric vehicles into their fleets. We help them understand how they can become carbon neutral. And we, on the other side, we help small and interesting companies understand how do you work with large organizations. So if you look at some of the really interesting stuff, like in this example, carbon sink walls, this is really interesting, emerging, clever technology in the smart city space. But these small companies, they're very good at their technology, but it's really difficult for them to be a big business and work with a large company like Amy. And for Amy's perspective, these small companies, they don't have the business models, they maybe don't have the structures to be able to cooperate, collaborate, and contract with a large company. So we help both groups work together. We help build the evidence base of what's possible. We help model out what the impacts will be socially, economically, business-wise. And then we help run trials and test beds where these companies can demonstrate that their technology works and can deliver what the large company needs. So it's a really interesting program where basically we de-risk both groups working together. So through a short amount of time, Amy can decide who they want to contract to, and we can help these small companies become better at their technology. We help them improve their technology, but we help them improve as a business so that if they were to win a contract with a large company, they can deliver their services. So we do a lot of support in that area as well. And so the last cohort, the last group just graduated from this program. And I just use this slide to show that this program that we run has real outcomes. So the big company, Amy, they wanted all of these things in this area, clean air, clean technology, low carbon emissions, etc. We had over 125 companies we worked with. We took 10 of them through to trials, and we helped them basically win contracts with a large company, and we helped them become better. And it was a really interesting program. And the last slide about the Catapult, I just use this slide to say we deliver these types of projects all around the world. We deliver some government level policy projects. we deliver some regional-based development projects, and we also deliver city-based innovation and smart city projects. So I'm now going to say a few words about smart cities in the UK, just to give you an example of what doing smart cities looks like when we're in the UK. So I'm going to give 4 examples of developments. And as I mentioned before, the UK does not have a UK smart city strategy. And that's really important. That's deliberate because going back to my original point, we focus on cities. Cities are unique, cities are special, and cities are different. So we think if you have a national smart city strategy, then you're trying to get all of these different and unique cities to fit in the same shape of project. And we don't think that's the best way of doing it. So the UK has a very clever way of supporting smart cities development, and it's based around what we call the UK City Deal model. So the UK government has a very innovative strategy where it wants regions, it wants cities to develop and to focus on how to develop the best they can. So they have competitions, and by competitions, I mean they put funding together and cities and regions can bid into these funds. They can suggest what they want to do, and if they can demonstrate that they can do these things, then the UK government will provide funding for them. The UK government also does give funds out to these regions anyway, but this city deal model is very important because it creates almost a competitive landscape where cities have to really try to deliver the best sort of projects they can to get the money and to get the funding. And a really big bit that underpins all of this is sustainability. And when I say sustainability, I don't just mean net zero, I mean economic sustainability as well. The government funded programs should catalyze the projects, it should get the project started, but these projects should become what we call business as usual. They should become part of the normal city functions. The national government shouldn't always have to fund them. So the 4 examples I will give you are Manchester, which is all about regional collaboration. I'll talk a little bit about London, which is about a really complex, large city and how you provide leadership there. I'll talk a little bit about Bristol, which is very much connectivity-based smart city solutions. And then I'll talk a little bit about Glasgow, which focused on citizen-centric and return on investment. So Manchester. So Manchester is a really interesting place. You may have heard of it because of the football. But this is all about energy and mobility. And it's all about government, academia, and business creating energy systems that interoperate. So energy systems that can collaborate instead of having different city functions operating by themselves. It was about getting them all operating together and having a positive impact, but understanding that by having this positive impact with the energy systems, it wasn't just about saving energy and costs, it was about how to get more renewable energy into the system. It was about air quality. It was about how to create new jobs and how to create GVA, gross value. So about how to create more economic value from these things. So back to one of my original slides where I said a city has many blocks, many sections. This project looked at how you can focus on energy, you can work with business, with academia, and with government, and how by focusing on energy and becoming low carbon, you can affect other blocks, such as creating new jobs, such as air quality and mobility. And so a really great project, really great outcomes. And as they trialed it and became successful, I think the facts are on your screen. They were looking at saving something like 57,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year, which was the equivalent of taking 12,000 cars off the road in terms of saving, in terms of pollution. So just by focusing on the energy systems, there were some great outcomes from this project. And it was just about mapping how these systems interoperate. It was looking at mobility, ICT systems, and getting all of these partners to collaborate. And what the Manchester City project is, they bid into some Central European funding, and they collaborated with cities from other countries to share the knowledge, to share the experience, and then to look at how, as they're successful with this Smart Cities project, they can share the experience and they can help other cities do the same thing. So a very nice example in Manchester. So London is probably the city that everybody in Japan may know of in the UK. It's probably the most famous, it's the largest, and it's the most complex. There's over 30 boroughs in London, and borough is like a district, or think of it as a small government within London. So London is divided into more than 30 small, almost governments. And if you think how difficult it is to manage a city that has almost mini governments, mini cities within itself, they have to have a very interesting strategy roundabout leadership. And so they launched a Smarter London Together plan, the key word being together. It was all about getting these local boroughs that make up London, all these local little governments, working together, collaborating together, but focused in the same direction. So they had 5 main areas. They wanted more user-designed services, so very citizen-centric public services. They wanted to strike new deals for city data. So they created the London Office for Data Analytics, which is called LODA, which was really interesting. And that was looking at how the local governments can ultimately share data, collaborate, make better use of data, and deliver better citizen services. They wanted world-class connectivity and smarter streets, so a lot of connectivity programs across all of the 30 plus London boroughs. They wanted to enhance digital leadership, because one thing in the smart city space, many people often forget, is the skills in the city. There's no point clever businesses, clever academics about AI, IoT, coming and doing things in a city if the people running the city don't understand AI, connectivity, 5G. So they really wanted to help upskill digital leadership in the city as well. And they wanted to improve citywide collaboration, because with any large city, there's many different bits of it, and those bits don't always work together as well as they could. So they really want to focus on optimizing and making the various bits of London work and collaborate better. And this example on your screen, I think, is very cool. So in terms of city engagement with citizens, part of the Smarter London Together program has a scorecard. It's kind of like homework, where you're given an assignment and then people score it. But what the City of London do, they put it online. So I'll share these slides afterwards. I believe the Smart Cities Institute of Japan will share these slides afterwards. And you can follow this link and you can see the Smarter London Together plan. They say they will do these things. And so they have a report card online where they will tell the citizens what they're doing, how they're doing, and how well they've done it. So going back to my original point about smart cities being measured, if you can measure these functions in a city, then you can impact them and change them. London allows citizens to look at what they're doing. They say they'll do something, they put online what they're doing about it, and they score them, and the citizens can check. So it's really quite an interesting way of connecting with the citizens there. Now, the third city is Bristol. Now, Bristol is probably the UK's second biggest tech hub. Loads of great tech companies there, loads of great academics doing very clever smart city stuff. And part of the reason it's the UK's second biggest tech hub is down to Bristol is Open. So Bristol is Open is a really interesting project, because it's a joint venture project between Bristol City Council and the University of Bristol. Now, they wanted to create a joint venture focusing on improving the quality of lives of people in Bristol. And they wanted to see how they could do this through allowing the city to become a smart city test bed. They wanted new and emerging technologies to be tested and trialed. And this was really interesting approach. And this, how could they do this? They had to, as a city, create the right environment to allow people to test and trial things. So everything is connected nowadays. So they decided if they create connectivity in the city, all the different types of connectivity required, then they would give a good positive environment where companies and academics could test and trial new ideas. And then Bristol is Open would support these tested and trialed ideas become part of the city services. So they had a strategy. They focused on some key areas, software-defined networks, Internet of Things, big data analytics, 5G, artificial intelligence and machine learning, CCTV analytics, and high-performance computing. They decided these are the key areas. If we've got connectivity in place, we want to focus on these areas. So they funded 3 key smart city projects, the Big Cloud project, the Replicate project, and a 5G smart tourism project. So they put a strategy in place, they put the connectivity in place, they decided to focus on specific areas, and they put funding into 3 specific projects. And the plan was to use these to improve the smartness of Bristol, to improve the quality of lives, create jobs, create opportunities for business and academics. And it's been a really successful project and program, and it still runs today. So I provided a link on the last slide where you can check out what's happening there. And the last one I wanted to say a few words about is Glasgow. So Glasgow is a really nice city. It's Scotland's biggest city, actually, bigger than Edinburgh. And Nakamura Shinsuke played football there when I was studying at the university, my favorite Japanese football player. But so this is, I use this example because I used the word sustainability before, and sustainability is very important when thinking about smart cities in the UK. You've got sustainability, like I said, in terms of low carbon, net zero, but sustainability economically as well. There's no point putting a lot of money behind a project that when you can't keep putting the money in, the project stops. So Glasgow was given £24 million to fund digital infrastructure and data initiatives to make citizens' lives better. And the whole point was to say, okay, spend a little bit of money, deliver these services, and what is the return on investment, the ROI? So the report produced at the end said that the benefits of the local economy and citizens equaled £144 million. So government spent £24 million and the benefit was £144 million. That's a great example of sustainability. And it really focused on technology and data, and it created some really cool stuff around about traffic management, public safety, citizen apps where they can engage with the city, energy efficient solutions, mobility in terms of encouraging cycling and walking, and intelligent street lighting based around safety and energy use. So again, thinking about those building blocks of a city, they focused on several blocks: the energy, the mobility, the citizen services, and they look to demonstrate that by having these smart city projects, by improving the score, the measures in these areas, that they could have sustainability, that they could have a good return on investment. So it's a really good project. So that's all I'm going to say today in terms of my presentation. So I think there's really a few key points in summary before I hand back to Jack. So I think key to understanding how to become a smarter city, you've got to really understand what you want to achieve. You've got to understand the connections between those 4 key stakeholders: the government, the academia, the business, the citizens. You need to understand the different blocks of a city, and you've got to have the right way of measuring them. Because if you can measure it, then you can demonstrate the impact and effect you're having with your smart city project, and you can demonstrate the positive things across all of those areas that are connected. So in the UK cities tend to focus on specific areas they want to become smarter at, while understanding the impact on different areas of the city by delivering these projects. The UK does not have an individual single smart cities policy, and that's because we focus at the city level, because we think, back to my presentation title, the cities are really the drivers of growth. And if you try to get them all to act in the same way, you maybe stop them in their individual and unique developments. And so I also mentioned the UK has what we call a catalyst, a smart cities organization that supports the development of smart cities in the UK and globally. And that's the Connected Places Catapult. And with those 4 examples in UK cities, I just wanted to give you an idea of what smart city projects look like in the UK. They're not all the same. There's different ways of approaching them, but all of them were focused on clear, measured goals that they could look to demonstrate what the impact and the effect of was of the smart city project. So I'd just like to finish by saying thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this presentation today. It will be shared afterwards. You'll have my contact details. And thank you very much for listening. Tak, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, for the excellent presentation. Wow, that's a lot of useful information and takeaways. Well, it's astonishing, actually. And then now we'd like to open to the discussion time, and we will encourage the viewers to write the message or questions to Andrew through the chat boxes. All right, and while we are waiting for the input from the audiences, I would like to ask some questions to you, Andrew. First, I was interested in the measurement you mentioned at the early part of the presentation. And we also are working with the Japanese government to develop the kind of standard set of KPIs. And the initial point for us was to measure the livability of the citizens in the city. Right, so livability indicator is the first set of the indicators we standardized for the Japanese cities. And now it's open source, open data available to cities. If they want to use it, it's open, free. And then as a second layer, we started to pay attention to the well-being of the citizens. So as a result of implementing smart city initiatives, citizens should be better off in terms of the well-being. So we measure the current well-being status, and then we'll measure again after implementing the smart cities and keep going, periodically. That's kind of plan. What do you measure typically for the smart city project in the UK?
Wow, great question. And fantastic stuff that you're doing, because the whole point of making a city smarter is to make it more livable, to make citizens' lives better and to make the city function better. Everything can be measured. What we focus on is creating frameworks to ensure that we measure things the same way, because different smart city projects in different cities, the danger is that they can measure the same thing using different measurements. So we try to create frameworks and methodologies that will capture key performance indicators. And it really depends. As I said, every city, you can divide it into different blocks. And depending on the smart city project, you'll measure that differently with a different framework. That's a lot of words to say. We don't typically measure stuff the same way, but we apply frameworks that are kind of open and out there that everybody can see, but we would use the same framework for the same projects. So if we're measuring air quality, air pollution, there's obviously the set measures for inorganic volatile compounds, etc. But we also try to, with our frameworks, capture the user acceptance, people's happiness, for instance, to make sure that all the things connected and linked to those city functions are measured at the same time.
Thank you very much. That's very much echoing with what we are doing. So we would like to implement kind of standard framework, but when it comes to actual measurement, cities should choose, pick and choose right set of the KPIs from the framework. So it's almost like a modules. One module is dedicated to the, let's say, air quality. Different set is dedicated to walkability. Others are more dedicated to, let's say, natural environment and so forth. And then depending upon the needs of the city, cities should choose the right set of the KPIs. But overall, that's pretty much standardized the framework. I think that's the best way to maintain the integrity of the data and understand the communicability of the KPIs across the cities.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Sorry, just to add to that, I think by using a framework, it's really important to use a framework rather than measuring individual things, because if a city wants to get more people walking and it wants to specifically measure we are getting more X number of people using bikes and walking compared to getting less people using the cars, then that's a really specific thing to measure. But if by doing that, they're closing roads on certain days, and that's great. So they can measure, we closed these roads, so more people walked and cycled. And that's great. You can measure that and you can tick your box and say, we did a good job. But if you've got a framework that also measures, the impact on business, the impact on other mobility forms, the impact on lots of other things, you capture what negative effects might also happen by doing this project. So the city might be, or the bit of the city looking at that might get a really big tick in the box for getting more people cycling. But if that project also had negative things that are captured in the framework, you can say, okay, it's a cool project and more people walked, but overall the impact in the city systems was maybe not so good. So that's why we would say a framework is better, because you capture scores and indicators that maybe the people on the project weren't thinking about when they wanted to deliver their project. So we think wider is a good way with that data. And like you said, if the data is all good and connected, then you can make really good evidence-based decisions on the success or not of these projects.
Very important point. Thank you very much, Andrew. So by having the framework, you can also pay attention to unintended byproduct, right?
Absolutely.
So you can kind of balance the effects. That's a very important point. Thank you very much. And the second point I was interested in was the UK city GEO model. So essentially that's the decentralized approach, giving more autonomy to cities to decide what they want. And how did you arrive at that approach? In the case of Japan, let's say, we historically centralized everything in the big cities like in Tokyo. So it was a way of making sure that Japan as a country can grow economically, having business centralized, having political decision-making centralized, having best universities located in the center of Japan, Tokyo. So, by centralizing everything, we kind of, aligned everything into one direction. But nowadays, because of the COVID-19, we recognize that putting everything into one basket is a little bit risky. And technology now allows us to decentralize as well. So we are now moving to the direction of the decentralized use of land, the use of the national land. National strategies to locate 100 different smart cities in different parts of Japan.
Wow.
So it was interesting how UK arrived at the decentralized autonomous approach.
Great question. So I think it's very similar to Japan. Historically, wealth was created in capital cities or what we call tier 1 cities. And by tier 1 city, I mean Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, the big cities. So historically, that's where the famous universities are. That's where the government departments are. That's where jobs are. And so there's no right way of doing smart cities, but with a very centralized model, the problem you have that sucks all the jobs, all the clever people, all the companies. If somebody is founding a clever company in Fukushima, they might be like, oh, cool, I've got to move to Tokyo if I'm going to find business, if I'm going to find staff, employees, if I'm going to get connections with the great universities. And what that does, it creates an effect where there's a drain, a sucking effect from all the smaller regions, all the smaller cities. Everything is just attracted to the big cities. So what the UK did a while ago, they recognized that, this is a problem. Everybody wants to go to London, but, London is not just the UK. So the UK government put in place some policies and some plans called levelling up. Levelling up is very much about how do you redistribute, how do you decentralize while making sure that everything functions as it should. Why should somebody who, I don't know, who founds a business in Fukuoka, why can't they stay in Fukuoka and be successful and grow there? Why does everything have to be about Tokyo? So, etc. That sort of mindset and mentality. And so how can you create the conditions where the cities can then become just as attractive? How can you, we call it creating, making a city become sticky. How can you make that city sticky? So good academic institutions, foreign companies want to go and invest and set up in Sapporo, etc. How do you create that? So by having the levelling up plans and agenda, by having the city deal and basically saying there's money and funding here, if as a city you can convince us that you can do that. And so that created almost a competitive landscape where all these different tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities and regions in the UK all of a sudden could access the funds, the smart city projects, could attract the companies and the academics to go there to do very cool and interesting stuff that was aligned with the unique characteristics of that city. And that's when I said in the presentation, there wasn't a national smart cities program. It was very much localized and focused on pushing wealth, economic development out of just London. There's cool stuff in London and there's good reasons to be there, but there's other great examples of opportunities to do stuff and to grow, create jobs, business opportunities, etc. in other parts of the UK. So it was a recognition that, all of that centralization wasn't quite healthy for the rest of the country.
Thank you very much. So pretty much we are on the same page then. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right. The next question is about the economic sustainability you mentioned. You use the term business as usual as after the smart cities being supported by the public funding, and we are actually facing the similar issue. We have done a lot of proof of concepts funded by the national government, and then after the funding finished, sometimes it's gone, not the implementation of whatsoever after that. So key question is, okay, we can begin the project with the public funding, but after all, we have to shift to autonomous, business as usual situation at the local level. And that's kind of, almost like a jumping from one end of the river to the opposite end of the river. How can you, go over the Death Valley of financial requirements to make a city independent? What's the key for the success?
That's a great question. So the world of smart cities is full of technology demonstrators and accelerators and incubators that they look nice, but they finish as soon as funding stops. So we recognized that a long time ago, and that's part of the reason people like the Connected Places Catapult exist. And when I went back to my original point about structures and processes, about city, academics, and business working together. So it's cool to have a clean air technology electric vehicle demonstrator in a city, and loads of national governments fund this. But the big question is, so what? What happens after you've demonstrated the technology works? So we tend to work, we call it capacity building. So we do a lot of work with the cities to look at the structures and processes they have for delivering city services, because every city spends money on mobility services, on citizen services, on healthcare services, okay? So how can that spend and those functions of the city, are they in a good position to have those demonstrators in the city demonstrate they can deliver the services and then become business as usual, be procured, be bought by the city? So a lot of it is about understanding how the city functions and then understanding how those functions can be focused on the smart city demonstrators. So an example is challenge-based programs. So instead of turning up and saying, I have a fancy technology, I'll demonstrate it here, we often work with cities to understand what the challenges and opportunities are. So going back to the city topology index, we can say, I don't know, Kyoto City. Okay, cool. We've done the measurements analysis and you could become better, you could become smarter in the mobility space. How do you do that? How can you do these scores? So we can help them understand, okay, you spend the money on this thing and your mobility function and services is like this. But if we put this challenge out, if we put a structured procurement and project process in place, we can basically say to the world of innovation, technology, academia, we have an opportunity. We want your innovation and your technology to solve it. If you can demonstrate you can solve this problem, we'll buy it. We'll use this service in the city. So by creating the right structure and process in the city, you can, rather than having people come and just set up technology and show you that it's fancy, they can demonstrate, test, trial, validate their technology in a way that will solve the city's problem. And if you can solve the city's problem, the city will want to buy it and deploy that service because it makes their city smarter. So going back to my original point about measuring these things, if we can measure these services and functions in the city, and if we can help the city understand how to be smarter, you can use those technology test beds and demonstrators to show the city what's possible. And if the city likes it, if we've worked with the city to put the right processes in place so it can buy these solutions once it's seen what's possible, then you can make it sustainable. Otherwise, you're right, you just end up with people showing that technology is fancy and that's that. So the point is, you know, cities, my presentation title about cities being one of those drivers of economic prosperity, if the city has the right structure and process in place to allow itself to open up to challenges and opportunities that these new companies and new clever people from university can go and solve and then have their services bought by the city, procured by the city, it creates new jobs. It absorbs and applies new technologies and innovations in a way that is business as usual for the city. So the city improves itself, makes itself smarter by allowing itself to adopt these new technologies and innovations, by help these new clever people coming out of university create companies. If you've got those structures in place, then you're a pretty smart city, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. By the way, Andrew, would you unshare the slides so that our faces will show up to the screen bigger?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that's better. All right, thank you very much. I should have said that earlier. All right, so your point was that the business model have to be rooted in the pain of the citizens, where citizens are willing to pay for the return, pay for the new service coming from the technology or whatever. That's a great idea. Thank you very much. And the last question from me, then after that, I will move on to the question from the audiences. I'm actually interested in the scorecard idea. Yeah, it's a transparency, accountability from the local government side. And, it clarifies that the smart city is made for the sake of the citizens. It's a great communication tool. How long have you been doing this?
So the Smarter Together plan, I think, was launched in 2018. So I think it's been up and running for 2 or 3 years. There's been various versions of it, but I think the one that I showed you has been going for a couple of years now.
Thank you very much. That's something that I should immediately learn and adapt to the Japanese cities. Thank you very much. All right, so let's move on to the questions from the audience. I will read it for you. First question was from Ota-san. How can we assess the satisfaction for citizens in smart city?
Great question. It's interesting because there's 2 things you can measure in the smart city space, tangible and intangible. It's very easy to measure the number of cars on a road because you can count them. Happiness, however, is and satisfaction is not something you can count. So there's many, many ways. And the best way of doing it that we find is having continuous engagement. So we often set up things called citizen labs, or for the smart city projects, too often, as Tak was saying, smart city projects are just an example of companies setting up their technology and showing everyone how fancy it is and how clever it is. If you have, when I said there's key stakeholder groups in the city, business, academia, government, and citizens, when you have these smart city projects, the citizens need to be involved. And we have citizen labs where they're part of the smart city project. So they can provide input all the time. Is this delivering what you want? How would you change it? It's not just about how clever the technology is. It's about, do the citizens want it? Are they happy with it? Does it have the positive impact? And if you've got citizens as part of the smart city projects and continuously talking to them, having them input ideas as well, then you can kind of get a good idea of their satisfaction because they can tell you all the time. Or with the London support report card, the citizens have a way of communicating directly with the city to say, you said you're doing this, you are doing this, and you've scored yourself, 8 out of 10 in terms of this project. As citizens, we think it's 5 out of 10. So you can also have that communication with the city like London does, where there's an open digital kind of platform where citizens can communicate with the city and contribute their thoughts on the scorecard. Many ways of doing it, but basically you need to involve citizens throughout the project. You don't just ask them at the end of a project if they're happy. I think the old style is to, at the start of a project, ask citizens, are you happy with the mobility services? At the end of the project, are you happy with the mobility services now? And say, ooh, they said at the start, they're 5 out of 10. At the end, they're 7 out of 10. Therefore, they are satisfied. That's quite an old way of measuring it. We tend to have citizens involved throughout projects. That's a much better way because they can input as well. And people tend to be much happier when they feel they have inputted to projects. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. It's somewhat analogous to corporations' employee engagement kind of scoring, not the satisfaction, more the engagement is the key. And then look at more concrete number of the people engaged rather than emotional feeling of satisfaction at the point in time. All right. Thank you very much. Next question is from Oshima-san. I'm from financial institution in Japan. Plan to increase the investment of net zero related project. Would you share a little bit about funding of finance opportunity of smart city project?
Wow, great question. And a really big and complex question, because funding smart city projects, there's many ways of doing it. And it also depends what you mean by smart city project. What I wanted to say with my presentation and why at the start I put the word smart in brackets is really we want smart city projects to really be city projects. It's all about making a city better, function slightly better. And okay, so a city will spend money normally anyway to make the city function. It will spend money on its mobility. It will spend money on its healthcare. So one way of how to fund smart city projects is looking at the money spent by the city anyway and trying to introduce new ways of working, smarter ways of working, and convincing the city to spend some of that money testing, trialing, validating new ways of working so that should they work, they become business as usual, and that's how the city would spend money anyway. As I mentioned, the UK government does what I call seed funding. You can put competition, a bit of money out to get people taking that chance and trialing these projects in the hope that if they're successful, they become business as usual. If you want to look at more of what's popular around the world is the PPP partnerships, etc. There's so many ways of funding these things, but going back to my point, it's got to be sustainable. It's got to make economic sense. If you can prove that it will give you a return on investment. In some countries when we work in, it's business driven. So the business will put money in because it knows that when it delivers the Smart Cities project, it will make more money from it. It's commercially viable for them. So in some countries, it's business driven, where we help them understand you invest a little bit today and you can make more money or you can win more business afterwards. Sometimes in some cities, the funding is city led. So we help cities understand the money they spend today, how they can spend it a little bit differently and become a bit smarter. And sometimes it's national government competition. There's many different ways, and obviously it's a big topic. If you want to get in touch, I'm happy to put you in touch with some financial experts as well.
Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to the next question from Kusumoto-san. It was interesting and fascinating that the UK does not have one national strategy for development of smart cities, but consider development as project basis. Can I ask what would happen that different approaches of different cities become contradictory or contracting each other? Were there any cases in the past like that, or projects are managed in some standards setups?
That's a great question. So I think the UK is basically founded on kind of open market and competitive free market models. So I think the way the country and the economy is set up is it's supposed to be competitive, because ultimately, if it's competitive, people will look how to succeed a bit better, how to make sure they get the return on investment. So the setup of the city deal, yes, it's structured in a way to create fair and open market competitions. So if I have a pot of money, if I want to encourage cities to become more net zero, to become better in terms of less polluting as the government, we can kind of set the framework. We can say, there's a lot of money here. If you can tell us how you would deliver a smart cities project that would help you achieve net zero, that would deliver better citizen services, then we'll give you some money. So we can have this much money, we can set the framework, and we can encourage competitive bidding. And we might say, okay, 5 cities, we'll give 5 cities money to do this. And so, yes, they will have different approaches, but we want different approaches. Because each city is different and unique, and they'll bid in, they'll deliver their project. And then part of the role of government is then to highlight the projects that worked well and help other cities do the same thing later on. So yes, it's competitive. If it's contradicting themselves, well, sometimes that's a good thing, because different cities are unique and separate. And by allowing them this competitive approach, we can see which ones work best, and the ones that work best, we then help share that knowledge and experience, and other cities can follow. So we think it's a good thing, and we think it's kind of managed in a light touch way by government in terms of that competition funding, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much. As related, one question from me, you talked about the case of the Glasgow, right? And I think Glasgow is a part of the Rajatized program under Lighthouse. And the cities across the national border are collaborating and sharing the practices. And I think it's very important that share the knowledge across the border of national border or municipal border, whatever. Is that happening a lot in UK?
Absolutely. The UK is all about collaboration and partnerships. In fact, we are setting up a really interesting program in Asia just now that we're very keen to get Japanese cities involved in, and it's called Innovation Twins. We're all about knowledge share, relationship building in a way that opens up kind of economic and academic collaboration opportunities. So a lot of our international work is city to city based. It's not national based. So it's not Japan to UK focused. It's Manchester to Kyoto focused sort of work. So we have a really interesting structured program with the British government that supports cities partnering with other cities. So when I said we do a lot of methodologies, we created a unique methodology that allows cities to partner with each other. So instead of just, if I was to say, okay, Japanese cities, what UK city do you want to partner with? Most of them will say London. Okay, cool. Is that the best partner? Is that the partner that will produce the best outcomes from partnership? Probably not. So we have a methodology that we can apply to cities that will basically say, okay, Sapporo, you are this type of city. You partner best with this type of city. And in the UK, there are 10 cities of this type. So your ideal partner in the UK is one of these 10 cities. And so we have a structured program that would then allow Sapporo to collaborate with, I don't know, Cardiff. Maybe Cardiff is the right type of city for Sapporo. And then we help these cities because of different culture, language, ways of doing business. We help them understand each other, and we help them work across the city level, the academic level, and the business level to understand what are the best collaboration opportunities that they will both benefit from the most. And then through that program, eventually you get to the point where you are collaborating and doing things. But we do a lot of that. It's huge for the UK.
Thank you very much. So maybe after this, let's talk about that, because last month we as a Smart City Institute helped the 2 cities in Japan to join the Rajatize program. You know, the Rajatize are Glasgow, Rotterdam, and Umeå from Sweden. The 2 cities, Hamamatsu and Kamakura, actually decided to participate. Likewise, you know, we can work with you to find out, you know, Japanese cities interested in collaborating with the cities in UK, right?
Excellent. Thank you.
As related, Kudo-san have a question. Thank you for your great presentation. I believe that you presented the mobility case in Indonesia that Catapult involved. Are you planning to support smart cities development in cities in Japan?
Very much. We would love to support anything. One thing that the Catapult does, we don't go to countries and kind of tell them how to be smart. As Tak was saying, it's collaborative. So any country we go and work in, we find partners. We understand what's possible and how to make the best benefit and how to help them succeed, and then we work. So we would never come to Japan and just work like a company. We would partner with somebody like the Smart Cities Institute or with business or government or cities, and then we would look at what projects we can support with. So we would love to do more work in Japan, but we need the right partners and we need the right projects where we think we can add value. The interesting thing about the Catapult is we're not for profit. We don't go to make money from smart cities. We've got probably one of the coolest KPIs and kind of missions. We're there to help people be successful. So we help people be successful through partnership and collaboration with the UK. So if we can find the opportunities where we can help people be successful, we're very happy to help support.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the next question from Oki-san. Do you think these examples, models, represent most of the cities in the UK? You are going to see many derivatives for each model in the future? Do
they represent most? So I would say I picked them because I think the bits that I highlighted are representative. If you think of Bristol as open, what the city did, it understood that if it wants to make it smarter, if it wants to create sustainable models of innovation to help create new jobs, new business models, to help test, trial, and validate new technologies, it needs to get the connectivity infrastructure in place. It needed to put the low power wide area networks, the right fiber, et cetera. Now you see lots of UK cities, most UK cities investing in connectivity infrastructure because they understand if you've got that in place, there's so many different benefits. If you look at the Glasgow example, they really looked at making sure that the money invested had a return on investment. It was sustainable investment. If you look at London's quite unique. It's kind of, it's almost like many different cities within one city. So that's a special case, but I wanted to highlight how a complex smart city sort of plan and strategy is. But the whole citizen engagement and open source, open kind of environment for engagement with citizens is true pretty much throughout every UK city. So I think the elements I highlighted are relevant throughout most of the UK cities.
Thank you very much. And we have the last question from the same Oki-san, but this question is pretty much interesting one because I'm also National Government Regulatory Reform Council member. And when you talk about transition to a digital age, always old regulation is the constraints. You have to reform it to fit into the today's requirements. And Otsuki-san's questions is related to that regulation part. He says, do you feel the governments, local or central, are willing and ready to work with you guys in such areas as deregulation? Are you satisfied with the present levels?
Wow, great question. So when you say, when the question says government, so I'm assuming different governments around the world. I mean, obviously the UK government's happy to work with us because they help set us up. So that's fine. And we're kind of set up to deliver along kind of the UK government plans. When you look around the world, you can kind of divide it into two. You've got quite new countries. If you look at places like in the Middle East, a lot of the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia, a lot of the laws, regulations concerning new emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, they don't exist because it's such a new area, new country, etc. So often you're helping them build from new and design these things from new. So totally open, very easy to work with. Japan, like the UK, there's a lot of culture, heritage, really long history. And I think one of the biggest problems with smart cities is you're building on legacy. Okay, so if you look at Tokyo, if you look at London, they weren't designed to have all these electric vehicles, etc. You have to change and alter existing systems. Or when you're looking at such a complex historical place like Osaka or Kyoto or Kobe, the city systems were set up many years ago, or the rules, regulations, laws were set up when all these technologies and innovations didn't exist. So it's not necessarily just deregulation, it's helping cities and national governments move to a new business as normal. They're used to operating in a certain way. And are we satisfied? I mean, it's not our job to be satisfied or not. We're there to help. I mean, sometimes it can be a challenge. Some cities and national governments are easier and more open to change, and some it takes more work because they're less risk adverse. Because whenever you change anything like a city system or a national government policy framework, it's risky because your change is about risk. And part of our job at the Catapult is to de-risk these things, to help trial, test, to help people understand, bring them on that journey, that journey of smartness. It depends on the government, it depends on the area we're working on, but sometimes the most difficult ones are the most satisfying when we get it right. But I think there's so much work and so many people want these things to change. And there's great stuff like the Smart Cities Institute in Japan and the work you mentioned, TAC, that you guys are working on. So maybe it's also a question, TAC, for you to mention in Japan, what your thoughts are.
Well, again, we are operating like the Catapult in UK. So we are mission to support Japanese smart city ecosystem to be successful. And of course, the smart cities are not the destination, it's a journey, right? So we are constantly changing, constantly evolving. And the important part is keep learning from the experience and move forward. And we had kind of a tragedy of the COVID-19, but it turned out to be triggered to move forward. I think it's opening up the good opportunity to move forward and also collaborate with the other countries like UK. So I'm looking for more opportunity to work with you, Andrew.
Absolutely, and we're looking forward to working more with you as well.
Thank you very much. Now we covered all the questions. So audiences, thank you very much for volunteering asking questions. And Andrew, thank you very much for your precious time, information, and perspective. We learned a lot from you. And lastly, could you make short message to audiences, maybe advice or message, whatever you have?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I've been super impressed with all the great work you guys are doing in Japan. A short message. I mean, good question. I would say, if I was to give any message, is to keep track of what the Smart Cities Institute of Japan are doing, what people like the Connected Places Catapult are doing, because as organizations, we're very similar. We're there to make people be successful, and we're very much open to hearing what people want to do. Check out the websites, check out all the great thought leadership by people like the Smart Cities Institute, and please keep engaging, because your attention, your thoughts, your questions, that helps inform us about what we do and how we operate. So by being engaged, as all of you are, and as giving us all of your your precious time for listening to this, that's just as important as the work that we're doing. It's about an ecosystem, it's about sharing knowledge, experience, and please stay engaged, and please do help and support the work that we're doing as well. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. And this concludes our webinar today. Kudo-san, please move on to your final remark.
Yes. So Andrew, first of all, thank you very much for your great work. And yes, let's keep on working together. And for all those people who attended today, thank you very much for staying with us. And I just like to finish off with some of our closing remarks. So first of all, as you can see it, can you see it? Let me see. Okay. First of all, you will receive a questionnaire after this event. So we will be highly appreciated if you could quickly answer the questionnaire. And our programs will be available on Smart City Institute Japan's Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, so those SNSs. And also, the information are posted on website as well as PTX. And the past videos, including today, can be viewed on our YouTube channels. And the future programs, next week, we have 2 English-only series like today. One is Tuesday from Singapore Research Institute, Eden Strategy Institute, and they will show the smart city government rankings that they produce. This is very unique. And also Friday, we have a guest speaker from World Bank, Tokyo Development Learning Center, Mr. Victor Muras, and they will speak about the TDLC's activities. And afterwards, we have more to come, webinar series. Yes, about Smart City Institute Japan, our membership the number is growing, and now we have over 430 membership. And I am hearing that the Catapult is also thinking about joining, so we welcome you as well. And our memberships and partners are growing as well. And I have to apologize to Andrew that I have not put the Catapult here yet, but I will put after this webinar. And we have many to come, including from London, Greater London Authority, and the British Embassy, Tokyo. And lastly, for the benefits of becoming our member, and we have a category called supporting member. And if you are the nonprofit organization, you are here, and the membership annual fee is free. So if you are not the membership yet, then please come to us, contact us, and we will provide you more information. So thank you very much for joining us today, and please have a nice weekend. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thank you very much, Andrew.